The school bell rang sharply, echoing through the hallways of Westwood Academy. Students rushed to their classrooms, backpacks swinging, sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Among the hustle and bustle, two siblings, Maya and Malik, walked into their new homeroom. They were twins, identical in their shared bright smiles and confident strides, but unique in their individual personalities. Maya was the bold one, always quick to speak her mind, while Malik had a quiet strength that drew people to him without a single word. Today, however, their smiles were a little strained. It was their first day at this prestigious private school, and they both knew they would stand out, not for their achievements, but for the color of their skin. Miss Summers, the homeroom teacher, glanced up as the twins entered. She was in her mid-40s, with a perfectly pressed suit and a sharpness in her eyes that seemed to dissect anyone who dared step into her domain. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she took in the newcomers. Her gaze lingered for a moment too long, betraying a flicker of disapproval. Maya noticed it immediately, her instincts honed from years of sensing subtle, and not so subtle, judgments. Malik gave her a small nudge as if to say, "Ignore it." "Class, we have 2 new students joining us today," Miss Summers announced, her tone clipped. "This is Maya and Malik Harper." She gestured to the only empty seats at the back of the room. "Take your seats quickly. We're already behind schedule." As they made their way to their desks, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that all eyes were on them, not with curiosity, but something colder. She could hear faint whispers and stifled giggles. Malik, ever the optimist, shot her a reassuring smile. "We've been through worse," it seemed to say. The lesson began, but it wasn't long before Miss Summers started singling them out. "Maya," she said abruptly, cutting off another student mid-sentence, "do you even understand what we're discussing? Or is this a bit too advanced for you?" Her words were laced with mockery, and a few students snickered. Maya's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "I understand just fine," she replied, her voice steady but firm. Miss Summers raised an eyebrow. "We'll see about that," she muttered, turning back to the whiteboard. Malik's fists clenched under the desk, but he stayed silent, his calm demeanor masking the storm brewing inside him. As the day went on, the twins couldn't escape Miss Summers' harsh remarks. Every mistake was magnified, every success dismissed. When Malik solved a particularly difficult math problem, she barely acknowledged it. "Even a broken clock is right twice a day," she muttered, loud enough for the class to hear. The other students laughed, emboldened by her behavior. By lunchtime, Maya and Malik sat alone at a table in the corner of the cafeteria. "She's awful," Maya said, stabbing at her food with a plastic fork. "She's not just mean, she's targeting us. You saw how she treated us compared to everyone else." "I know," Malik admitted, his voice low. "But we can't let her win. She wants us to react, to make a scene. We have to be smart about this." Maya nodded reluctantly, but the fire in her eyes hadn't dimmed. "Smart doesn't mean silent," she said. Malik didn't argue. He knew his sister well enough to realize she wouldn't let this go quietly. The next day, things escalated. Miss Summers seemed determined to humiliate the twins at every opportunity. During a class discussion on historical figures, she made a cutting remark about their ancestors. "Not everyone's family contributed positively to history," she said, looking directly at Maya and Malik. Gasps echoed around the room, and even some of the other students looked uncomfortable. But Miss Summers seemed unfazed, her smug expression daring them to respond. Maya's hand shot up. "Actually," she began, her voice steady, but filled with barely concealed anger. "Our ancestors overcame unimaginable obstacles, and their strength paved the way for future generations. I call it a positive contribution." Miss Summers' face darkened, but before she could respond, the principal's voice crackled over the intercom. "Miss Summers, please report to the office immediately." The room fell silent as she stiffened, her usual air of superiority momentarily replaced with uncertainty. She glared at Maya before leaving the classroom, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Miss Summers opened her mouth, but no words came out. She felt the walls closing in around her, the weight of the situation finally sinking in. Back in the classroom, Maya and Malik sat through the rest of the lesson in silence, their thoughts swirling. They had no idea their parents were already taking action on their behalf. For them, the day felt like an endless series of small battles, each one chipping away at their patience. Maya had wanted to fight back, to stand up for herself and Malik at every turn, but she knew Malik was right. Drawing more attention to themselves would only give Miss Summers more fuel. When the bell finally rang, signaling the end of the school day, the twins packed their bags and headed toward the parking lot. They walked side by side, their steps in sync, as if their shared frustration had forged an even stronger bond between them. As they reached the car, they saw their parents waiting by the door. Maya's heart sank. Her mother's expression was unreadable, but her father's jaw was set, a sure sign that he was angry. She and Malik exchanged a glance. They knew this conversation was coming, but they hadn't expected it so soon. "How was your day?" their mother asked, her voice calm but probing. "It was fine," Malik replied quickly, but Maya wasn't as careful. "Miss Summers was awful," she blurted out. "She kept picking on us, making these comments." "Maya," Malik warned, but their mother held up a hand. "It's okay, Malik. We already know." Her voice softened as she looked at her children. "You don't have to explain. We've seen the video." Maya's eyes widened. "Video? What video?" Their father stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "A classmate of yours recorded what happened. They sent it to us anonymously. We've already spoken to the principal." Maya and Malik stood in stunned silence. They hadn't expected anyone to stand up for them, let alone capture the evidence they needed to prove their case. "What's going to happen now?" Malik asked, his voice cautious. "That's up to the school," their father said. "But we're not letting this go. You deserve to be treated with respect, and we'll make sure this teacher understands that." As they drove home, Maya stared out the window, her mind racing. For the first time all day, she felt a flicker of hope. Malik, sitting beside her, was quieter than usual, but there was a glint in his eye that told her he was thinking the same thing. They weren't alone in this fight. The ride home was quiet, save for the hum of the car engine. Maya and Malik sat in the back seat, their thoughts swirling as the city passed by outside the window. Their mother occasionally glanced at them in the rearview mirror, her sharp eyes softening each time they met Maya's or Malik's gaze. Their father, always the steady anchor of the family, sat in silence, his hand resting on the center console as though keeping himself grounded. When they finally pulled into the driveway, the twins hesitated before getting out. Their home, usually a place of comfort and refuge, felt heavy with unspoken words. Maya was the first to break the silence as they stepped inside. "What happens if the school doesn't do anything?" she asked, her voice tinged with frustration. "People like Miss Summers always seem to get away with it." Her mother set her purse on the counter and turned to face her. "That's not going to happen," she said firmly. "This is different. The video is proof, and people are already starting to talk. The school can't afford to ignore it." Maya frowned but didn't argue. She trusted her parents, but the weight of the day still pressed heavily on her. Malik, sensing her unease, spoke up. "Maybe this is bigger than just Miss Summers," he said, his voice thoughtful. "She's just one person, but what about the students who laughed at her comments? Or the ones who whispered behind our backs? This isn't just about her, it's about the whole environment." Their mother's expression softened as she sat down at the kitchen table. "You're right, Malik. This is about more than one teacher's behavior. It's about making sure the school, the students, and the staff understand why this is unacceptable. And that takes more than one meeting with the principal." Maya sat down across from her mother, her frustration giving way to a quiet determination. "Then what do we do? How do we change something so big?" Her father joined them at the table, his face calm but resolute. "One step at a time," he said. "It starts with holding Miss Summers accountable. But it doesn't end there." The twins nodded, their resolve hardening. They had always been taught to stand up for what was right, even when it wasn't easy. And this time, they weren't alone. The next day at school, the atmosphere felt different. Whispers followed Maya and Malik wherever they went, but this time, the murmurs carried a mix of curiosity and unease. It seemed the video had spread, and everyone knew what had happened in Miss Summer's classroom. Some students avoided eye contact, while others offered awkward smiles or muttered half-hearted apologies. The twins weren't sure how to feel about it. When they walked into homeroom, Miss Summers wasn't there. Instead, a substitute teacher greeted the class, explaining that Miss Summers was on leave. Maya and Malik exchanged a glance but didn't say anything. They knew their parents had been meeting with the school administration, but they hadn't expected action this quickly. During lunch, one of their classmates, a girl named Emma, approached their table. Emma had always been quiet, keeping to herself in the back of the room. But today, she seemed nervous, her hands fidgeting with the straps of her backpack. "Hey," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For laughing, I mean. When Miss Summers made that comment about your ancestors, I didn't think about how wrong it was at the time, but now I realize it was awful. I'm really sorry." Maya studied Emma for a moment, searching for any hint of insincerity. But the girl's face was earnest, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Thanks," Maya said finally. "It means a lot that you're saying this." Emma nodded, her relief evident. "If there's anything I can do to help, let me know," she said before hurrying off, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Malik watched her go, his expression thoughtful. "Maybe things really are starting to change," he said. Maya wasn't so sure. "One apology doesn't fix everything," she said, "but it's a start." As the day went on, more students approached them with similar sentiments. Some were apologetic, while others were simply curious, asking questions about what had happened and how the twins were handling it. Maya and Malik answered as best they could, but the attention was exhausting. By the time the final bell rang, they were both ready to escape the spotlight. At home, their parents were waiting with updates from the school. "Miss Summers has been suspended pending an investigation," their father explained. The school is also planning a meeting with parents and staff to address the broader issues this has brought to light. Maya felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was quickly tempered by the weight of everything that had happened. "What about us?" she asked. "People keep treating us like we're some kind of spectacle. It's like they don't know if they should be mad at us for speaking up or proud of us for not staying quiet." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "You've done something incredibly brave," she said. "And bravery isn't always comfortable. But you've sparked a conversation that needed to happen, and that's not something to be ashamed of." Malik nodded, his quiet strength shining through once again. "We're not ashamed," he said. "We're just tired." Their father smiled, a small but genuine expression of pride. "Change takes time," he said. "But you're not in this alone. We're with you every step of the way." As the family sat together, the tension of the past few days began to lift, replaced by a shared sense of purpose. The battle wasn't over, but they were ready to face whatever came next, together. The days following Miss Summer's suspension were anything but calm. At school, the atmosphere felt charged, as if everyone was waiting for something to happen. Maya and Malik couldn't walk down the hallway without catching snippets of hushed conversations or feeling the weight of curious stares. Some students were supportive, nodding at them in solidarity, while others seemed to resent the attention the twins were receiving. A few even muttered comments under their breath, though none dared to confront them outright. Maya, always the bolder of the two, found it harder to bite her tongue. During a group project in English, one of their classmates, Derek, rolled his eyes as she spoke up with an idea. "Of course, you have the answer," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. "What's that supposed to mean?" Maya snapped, her voice cutting through the chatter in the room. Derek shrugged, feigning innocence. "Nothing. Just that you've been acting like the star of the show lately. Must be nice to have everyone fighting your battles for you." The room fell silent, all eyes on the two of them. Malik, who had been quietly working on his part of the project, looked up, his jaw tightening. But before he could say anything, Maya leaned forward, her voice steady but firm. "You think this is about attention," she said, her eyes locked on Derek. "You think it's fun having to fight just to be treated like everyone else. If you'd rather go back to ignoring the problem, that's on you. But don't you dare act like standing up for ourselves is some kind of privilege." Derek's face reddened, but he didn't respond. The teacher cleared her throat, awkwardly steering the class back to the assignment, but the tension lingered in the air. Maya sat back in her chair, her heart pounding. She didn't regret speaking up, but the weight of constantly defending herself was beginning to take its toll. After school, the twins attended a meeting organized by the principal. It was a gathering of students, parents, and staff to discuss the issues raised by Miss Summers' behavior and how the school could create a more inclusive environment. The auditorium buzzed with murmurs as people filed in, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright skepticism. Maya and Malik sat with their parents near the front, their presence a subtle reminder of why this meeting was happening in the first place. As the principal opened the discussion, the tension in the room became palpable. Some parents voiced their outrage, demanding stricter policies to prevent discrimination. Others were less sympathetic, arguing that the incident was being blown out of proportion. One parent stood up, her voice sharp as she addressed the room. "I'm all for teaching tolerance," she said, "but we can't punish teachers for every little comment that gets misinterpreted. Miss Summers has been an excellent educator for years. Are we really going to ruin her career over one mistake?" Maya's mother stood then, her calm demeanor commanding the room's attention. "This isn't about ruining anyone's career," she said. "It's about accountability." Miss Summers didn't make a little comment. She made repeated, deliberate remarks that targeted my children and undermined their dignity. If we ignore that, what kind of message are we sending to our students? The room buzzed with murmurs, but the principal quickly regained control, redirecting the discussion to actionable steps. Maya glanced at Malik, who gave her a small nod. They had discussed this moment with their parents beforehand, and now it was their turn to speak. Malik stood first, his usual quiet demeanor replaced with a steady resolve. "We're not here to attack anyone," he began, his voice calm but firm. "We're here because we believe this school can do better. No one should feel like they don't belong because of who they are. This isn't just about us, it's about everyone." Maya followed, her voice carrying the passion Malik's words lacked. "We're not asking for special treatment," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "We're asking for fairness, for respect. And that starts with holding people accountable when they cross the line. If we don't stand up now, when will we?" Their words hung in the air, the weight of their message sinking in. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, one by one, people began to clap. It started with a few students in the back, then spread to the parents and teachers until the entire room was filled with applause. But even as Maya and Malik sat down, their hearts racing, they knew the battle wasn't over. The meeting had opened the door for change, but real progress would take time, and not everyone was on their side. The next day, as the twins arrived at school, they found a note taped to Maya's locker. The handwriting was messy, the words hastily scrawled, "Keep your mouth shut or else." Maya's stomach churned as she read it, but she refused to let fear take hold. Instead, she showed it to Malik, who clenched his fists but nodded in agreement. "We're not backing down," he said quietly, his voice filled with determination. "Not now." They reported the note to the principal, who assured them it would be investigated. But the incident only fueled their resolve. The fight for change wasn't just about Miss Summers anymore. It was about confronting the prejudice that ran deeper than one teacher's actions. As the day went on, the twins noticed a growing divide among their classmates. Some students rallied behind them, speaking out against the hate and showing their support in subtle but meaningful ways. Others distanced themselves, either out of fear or disagreement. And then there were those like Derek, who seemed determined to undermine their efforts at every turn. The tension reached its peak during an assembly later that week, where the principal addressed the entire school. As he spoke about the importance of respect and inclusivity, Maya and Malik felt the weight of every gaze in the room. Some were supportive, others skeptical, but all of them were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. And as the assembly ended, the twins knew the moment of reckoning was drawing closer. They had come this far, but the hardest part was yet to come. As the students filed out of the assembly, the tension in the air felt heavier than ever. Maya and Malik stayed behind, watching the crowd disperse. The principal's words had been well-intentioned, but they could feel the lingering unease among their peers. Change wasn't something that could be forced in a single meeting, and for some, it was clear that resentment was brewing. By lunchtime, the twins could sense that something was off. Whispers followed them wherever they went, sharper and more persistent than before. When they entered the cafeteria, they noticed an unusual number of eyes darting their way. Maya glanced at Malik, her instincts on high alert. "Something's going on," she murmured, keeping her voice low. Malik nodded, his gaze scanning the room. "Let's sit. Act normal." As they settled at their usual table, Maya's phone buzzed. She pulled it out, her stomach dropping as she opened the message. It was from an unknown number, but the content was unmistakable. A photo of the two of them, taken just moments ago in the cafeteria, accompanied by the words, "You're not welcome here." She showed the message to Malik, whose jaw tightened. "This is getting worse," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to tell someone." Before Maya could respond, Emma approached their table. Her face was pale, and she looked more anxious than usual. "Hey," she said quickly, glancing around as if to make sure no one was watching. "I need to talk to you. It's important." Maya and Malik exchanged a look but nodded. Emma sat down, lowering her voice to a whisper. "I overheard something in the locker room after gym. A group of students, Derek and his friends, they're planning something. They're saying you're ruining the school's reputation, and they want to teach you a lesson." Maya's heart raced, but she kept her expression steady. "Did they say what they're planning?" she asked. Emma shook her head. "No, just that it's happening after school. I thought you should know." "Thanks, Emma," Malik said, his voice calm but firm. "We'll handle it." As Emma hurried away, Maya leaned closer to her brother. "What do we do? We can't let this slide." "We won't," Malik said, "but we need to be smart. If we overreact, it'll just give them more ammunition." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Maya and Malik stayed vigilant, but the tension in the air was suffocating. When the final bell rang, they gathered their things and headed toward the parking lot, their senses on high alert. It didn't take long for the confrontation to materialize. As they reached the far edge of the lot, a group of students stepped out from behind a row of cars. Derek was at the center, his smirk as sharp as a blade. Well, he said, his tone mocking. "Look who's here." Maya squared her shoulders, refusing to back down. "What do you want, Derek?" "What I want," he said, stepping closer, "is for you two to stop pretending like you're better than everyone else. You think you can waltz in here, play the victims, and turn this school upside down. Not gonna happen." "Standing up for ourselves doesn't make us better than anyone," Malik said, his voice steady. "But it does make us braver than you." Derek's smirk faltered, but only for a moment. "You think you're so tough," he sneered. "But you're just cowards hiding behind your parents and the principal." Maya took a step forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "You're the one hiding, Derek. Hiding behind your friends, your ignorance, and your fear of anything different. If you have a problem with us, say it outright. Stop skulking around like a coward." Derek's face darkened, and for a moment, it seemed like he might lash out. But before he could say anything, a voice called out from behind them. "Is there a problem here?" Everyone turned to see Mr. Graves, the principal, walking toward them. His expression was stern, his gaze sweeping over the group of students. Derek stepped back, his bravado fading. No problem, he muttered, shoving his hands into his pockets. Mr. Graves raised an eyebrow, but didn't press the issue. Good, he said, because if I catch wind of any harassment, there will be consequences. Now, all of you, go home. The group scattered, muttering under their breath as they walked away. Maya and Malik exchanged a glance, relief mingled with unease. They knew this wasn't the end. If anything, it felt like the storm was just beginning. As the students dispersed, Maya and Malik stood in the parking lot, watching Derek and his group retreat. Mr. Graves gave them a long look, his face softening slightly. If anything like this happens again, you come straight to me, he said firmly. We're taking this seriously, and so should they. Thank you, Mr. Graves, Malik said, his voice calm but sincere. Maya nodded in agreement, though her mind was still racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Their parents were waiting in the car when they approached. Their father rolled down the window, concern etched on his face. Everything okay? He asked. Maya hesitated but nodded. For now, she said, but Derek and his friends, they're not going to stop. Their mother's eyes narrowed. Then we'll make sure they do, she said firmly. This ends today. That evening, the family sat down together to plan their next steps. Their parents had already spoken with Mr. Graves about increasing security measures, but it was clear that more needed to be done. We need to address the root of the problem, their father said. The school can't just focus on punishing individuals, they need to change the culture. Maya looked at Malik, a spark of determination lighting up her eyes. We should talk to the school board, she said. If we can share our story and show them how deep this goes, maybe they'll finally take it seriously. Malik nodded, and we can suggest programs, diversity workshops, anti-bullying campaigns, something that makes a real difference. Their parents exchanged a glance, pride evident in their expressions. That's a great idea, their mother said. We'll help you prepare. The next day, Maya and Malik walked into the school with renewed purpose. They spent the morning gathering signatures for a petition to present to the school board, speaking with students and teachers who supported their cause. To their surprise, even some of the students who had initially stayed silent began to step forward, offering their help. By lunchtime, the twins had collected over 100 signatures. Emma joined them at their table, holding a clipboard filled with additional names. People are starting to see what you're doing, she said, smiling shyly. They want to be part of it. Maya grinned. Thanks, Emma. We couldn't have done this without you. As the day went on, the tension that had hung over the school began to lift. Derek and his friends kept their distance, their earlier bravado now replaced with uneasy silence. But Maya and Malik remained cautious, knowing how quickly things could change. That evening, the family attended the school board meeting. The room was packed with parents, teachers, and students, all eager to hear what the twins had to say. Maya and Malik stood at the front of the room, their voices steady as they shared their experiences. They spoke not just about Miss Summers, but about the culture of silence and complicity that had allowed her behavior to go unchecked. When they finished, the room erupted into applause. But just as the meeting seemed to be wrapping up, an unexpected voice spoke up from the back of the room. Wait a minute, said a familiar figure stepping forward. It was Miss Summers. The room fell silent as she approached the podium. Her usual air of superiority was gone, replaced by a mixture of nervousness and regret. I need to say something, she began, her voice unsteady. What I did was wrong. There's no excuse for my behavior, and I take full responsibility for the harm I caused. Maya and Malik exchanged a glance, their surprise evident. Miss Summers took a deep breath before continuing. But this isn't just about me. This is about a system that allowed me to think my actions would go unnoticed. The truth is, I wasn't held accountable because no one wanted to confront what was happening. That needs to change. Her words hung in the air, the weight of her admission shocking everyone in the room. For the first time, Maya saw a glimmer of sincerity in her former teacher's eyes. It didn't erase the pain she had caused, but it was a step toward something better. In the days that followed, the school began implementing new programs to address discrimination and promote inclusivity. Maya and Malik became leaders in the effort, working with students and staff to create a safer, more welcoming environment for everyone. But the final twist came weeks later, when an anonymous letter arrived at their home. It was from a student who had been part of Derek's group, confessing their role in the harassment and apologizing for their actions. The letter ended with a simple but powerful message. "You showed me that it's never too late to do the right thing. Thank you for standing up." Maya and Malik read the letter together, their hearts full. The fight had been long and exhausting, but in that moment, they knew it had been worth it. Change wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was happening, one step at a time. In the weeks that followed, the school transformed in ways Maya and Malik had only hoped for at the start of their journey. The programs introduced weren't just surface-level fixes, they tackled the deeper issues within the school's culture. Workshops on diversity and inclusion became a regular part of the curriculum. The administration also created a student-led council to address grievances and ensure that everyone's voice was heard. Maya and Malik were asked to serve on it, not as symbols of what had happened, but as leaders in the school's effort to create lasting change. The twins had been hesitant at first. The weight of constantly being in the spotlight had taken its toll on both of them, and they weren't sure if they wanted to take on even more responsibility. But after talking it over with their parents and each other, they realized that this was their chance to make a real difference, not just for themselves, but for every student who had ever felt silenced or invisible. Their first few meetings with the council were eye-opening. Students shared stories of experiences they kept hidden for years, their voices trembling but steady as they spoke their truths. Some had faced discrimination, while others admitted to being bystanders who didn't know how to help. The discussions were raw and emotional, but they were also healing. For the first time, people were listening to one another. Derek's absence during these meetings was noticeable, but not surprising. After the incident in the parking lot, he had kept his distance from Maya and Malik, his bravado replaced by a quiet unease. While he hadn't faced any formal punishment, the social consequences of his actions had been enough to make him rethink his behavior. One day, he approached Malik in the hallway, his expression uncertain. "Hey," he said, scratching the back of his neck. "Can we talk?" Malik raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Sure." Derek glanced around to make sure no one was listening. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I was wrong, and I know I can't take it back, but I want to do better." Malik studied him for a moment, searching for any hint of insincerity. But Derek's voice was genuine, his usual cocky demeanor nowhere to be seen. "It's not about me forgiving you," Malik said finally. "It's about what you do next. If you really mean it, prove it by being better." Derek nodded, a flicker of determination crossing his face. "I will," he said quietly before walking away. When Malik told Maya about the conversation later, she was skeptical. "You really think he'll change?" she asked. "I don't know," Malik admitted, "but at least he's trying. That's more than I expected." Life at school slowly returned to a new normal. The whispers and stares that had followed Maya and Malik everywhere began to fade as other events took center stage. But the twins' impact remained, woven into the fabric of the school's growing commitment to inclusivity and respect. Miss Summer's resignation came as a surprise to some, but not to Maya and Malik. While her public apology had been a step in the right direction, it was clear that her time at the school had come to an end. In her resignation letter, she acknowledged the harm she had caused and expressed a desire to continue learning and growing outside of the classroom. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. At home, the twins' parents couldn't have been prouder. "You've shown incredible strength," their father said one evening as they sat around the dinner table. "Not just in standing up for yourselves, but in paving the way for others." Their mother nodded, her eyes shining with pride. "You've proven that change is possible, even when it feels impossible. That's something no one can take away from you." Maya and Malik smiled, their hearts full. The journey had been difficult, but it had also been worth it. They had faced challenges they never expected, but they had come out stronger, more united, and more determined than ever to make a difference. As the school year went on, the twins found themselves looking forward to the future with hope. The council's work continued, and they began to see the fruits of their efforts in the way students treated one another. It wasn't perfect, change never was, but it was progress, and for Maya and Malik, that was enough. On the last day of school, as they packed up their lockers and said goodbye to their friends, they couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The challenges they had faced had tested them in ways they never could have imagined, but they had also shown them the power of resilience, unity, and standing up for what was right. As they walked out of the building for the final time that year, Malik turned to Maya with a small smile. "Do you think we made a difference?" Maya looked out at the school, the sound of laughter and chatter filling the air as students celebrated the start of summer. "Yeah," she said, her voice steady. "I think we did." And as they stepped into the sunlight, the weight of the past few months finally lifted, leaving them with a sense of peace and possibility. The fight wasn't over. There would always be more to do, more to change, but for now, they could rest, knowing they had made the world just a little bit better. And that was a victory worth celebrating.